Now, in the book, you went to all these destinations across the globe. How many countries did you go to again?
So I went to 10 in total if you count the UK where I live now. And I was essentially looking for really great examples of policies that have been in effect for at least about 10 years and that are working, that are successful, and that are helping address inequality and actually make people's lives better, and thinking about how we can learn from them in the US.
And Singapore, kind of a complicated country. When I wrote the thumbnail for the show, some people sent some like, Singapore. Didn't they cane that guy? Are you old enough to remember the caning?
What year was it?
Oh God, 94, 95?
So I won't say my age, but I was a so Singapore is a complicated example, but it was really important for me to include it because part of what happens in the States is that whenever you talk about these really great examples that in the US we would consider sort of left wing or socialist even, there's always this pushback that's like, oh, well, that's Scandinavia or that's Europe. And I wanted to provide this example of a country that by no means is left wing, right? And that can't really be considered socialist. And
Mm.
yet, is hyper capitalist, is how I keep describing it. And yet did decide that housing is essentially a right. And so my point in including Singapore is sort of, if Singapore can do it, certainly we can.
Would you say Singapore is authoritarian, or would you put it in line with the United States in that regard? Or are you afraid to say for fear of caning?
No, I'm not afraid to say anything, but I wouldn't say that it is authoritarian. They do have elections, uh, but regardless of what their political system is, I think what's really important is that they've managed to have this amazing housing policy that has essentially eradicated homelessness in
Mhm.
Singapore. And again, this is a place that's so hyper capitalist that even schools, they don't really have public schools the way that we do even in the States, where you you don't have to pay to send your child to school, to a public school. They have fee charging schools everywhere. And so there really is this ethos of pick yourself up by your own bootstraps that's even stronger there than it is in the US.
What elements of the Bukit Ho Suite rehousing project, speed of construction, land lease regime, pension fund financing could be realistically adapted to Los Angeles' legal and political framework, in your opinion?
So I think what's really important to recognize is that there are a lot of elements that are already present in Los Angeles that we're just not putting to use well. So, for example, Megan Day in Jacobin, right after the fires, was calling for requisitioning vacant housing units. So Los Angeles has about 93,000 empty units. And a lot of these are kept deliberately empty to wait for the property value to rise. So this is something that Megan Day kind of pointed out and was saying, like 46,000 of those units
Mhm.
are kept in this state of sort of limbo in which they're not for rent or sale. And there are so many more that are also out of reach, right? And so what she was calling for was using an example of what happened in the UK where I live now in World War II, was to use those vacant properties that the city could actually requisition them and house fire victims. And that what better use of of these empty homes, in a place where there is tens of thousands of houses that we need, there's a shortage.
Mhm.
It's a real sin to have 93,000 units completely empty. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that the city actually already owns quite a lot of vacant land. And you had this really interesting thing where Mayor Karen Bass announced in March that Los Angeles was actually looking to sell these lots to private developers. in order to create starter homes. And this is so frustrating to me that every single time we talk about permanent housing for people who are unhoused, or we talk about city owned land and what to do with it, there's always this involvement of the private sector, this handing over of publicly owned spaces and money to
Mhm.
private developers. And as long as that keeps happening, it is so difficult to really meaningfully address the housing shortage we have in Los Angeles. Because for example, going back to Karen Bass and this program that she has, I think it's called the Inside Safe, where you're there, she's going, or there's a program for the city to help move people who are in encampments into motels and then ultimately into permanent housing. But the great majority of people who go through that program have been coming out and not been able to go to permanent housing.
Yep.
And that is hugely to do with the fact that we do not have any, like, enough publicly owned units to actually house people in.